Good morning, everyone. Okay, so if you are a co-founder of a startup, you probably have a very good familiarity with this slide, and this is exactly how it feels when you are a startup entrepreneur. But I want to give you a little background on my own entrepreneur story. I'll start with who I am. So I have Taiwanese parents, but I was born and raised in the U.S., lived in suburban Washington, D.C., and in Los Angeles as I was growing up. And I was lucky in that when I was growing up, it just happened to be when personal computers were becoming a fad. I started on an Atari 2600, which is not a personal computer, but then at the age of 12, my uncle bought me a Commodore 64, which allowed me my first platform to begin programming. As a consequence of that, I actually fell into computer science at UC Berkeley, where I graduated in '97. And in the last year of college, I pretty much stopped going to classes. In fact, I was really horrible. There's no chance of me ever going to grad school because essentially I did not attend a single lecture during senior year. Instead, I had a full-time job at the business school where I served as the webmaster for the business school's website. That really actually played into my own passion. I hated actually just regular computer programming that they were teaching at Berkeley, and instead was really interested in web programming, which at the time there were no courses on. So during the daytime, I was pulling down a full-time job at the business school. At nighttime, I was basically paying off the bills by doing contract work for web design. The day after graduation, I actually joined with a partner and signed a lease for our first office, and we opened our first web design agency, Design Reactor. We merged that with another company at the end of 2000 to start Rotten Tomatoes together. Later on in 2004, we sold Rotten Tomatoes, and my partner moved out to China, and I joined him at the end of 2005, where eventually in 2007 we started Alive Not Dead. We just recently sold Alive Not Dead this year to MIG or MiG-33, which is one of the sponsors for this conference today. And now, currently, I'm senior PM at WeChat, the mobile messaging company. So hopefully that gives you a very quick introduction to what I've been doing for 20 years. So today I'm actually, those 20 years, it sounds like it's a very steady progression, but actually I want to give you a little background because frequently when you hear entrepreneur stories, you only get to hear the end point. You only get to hear the success stories. You get to hear about the $19 billion that WhatsApp landed, or you get to hear about Instagram only hustling it out for a year and a half and ending with that $1+ billion acquisition. But in fact, as a serial entrepreneur, what you understand on your second, your third, your fourth company is that you don't remember any of those points. What you remember is actually the internal struggle and the hustle of actually building a company. So what's building the company is actually the stuff that was covered yesterday was a lot about investments, a lot about raising money, but that is also not what's relevant to what you're going to remember down the line. Raising money is important for certain companies, but after the 2 acquisitions, after 5 companies, it's definitely not something that I fondly keep in my memory as I walk down the road of my professional career. Instead, what you remember is these upturns and downturns. And I'm going to try to. A lot of people try to give you tips about what to do. I thought I'd do something a little different today and tell you about maybe what not to do, because I've made a lot of mistakes, and hopefully some of my mistakes for the other startup founders here, you guys will be able to avoid some of these. So I'll start with the most important thing, which is, I think, co-founders, because co-founders, it's like if you're a director. I'm a big movie fan, obviously, by doing Rotten Tomatoes. And as a director, they say that 80% of your job as a director is done in casting, right? Casting and finding the right people to work on your movie. Actually shooting the movie, that obviously has some relevance, but the team of characters you bring on to build your company is actually extremely important. So I know this because this is my team from Rotten Tomatoes. The 3 guys at the right Paul, Sen, and myself are the 3 co-founders for Rotten Tomatoes. And our CFO, Lily, and Paul are head of BizDev. And we've been a team for a while. We went through 2 companies together. Originally, Patrick and myself, we've actually been partners for 4 separate companies now. But I've actually lost co-founders, and losing co-founders actually can be almost a traumatic event as a startup entrepreneur. Frequently, for most companies, that is the big decision point about whether your company is going to continue or cease to exist. So I'd like to, it's actually happened to me on 2 different companies. When I started my first company, the web design company, I actually lost 2 co-founders out of 3 people, both of my co-founders in the first month of operation. Okay? And I could have just stopped right there. But instead I actually found Patrick, who was my co-founder through Design Reactor and Rotten Tomatoes. And the company continued to thrive. And the same thing for Alive Not Dead. I actually lost Patrick halfway through. Patrick, in that case, had to deal with the illness, and we had to continue the company without him. So I'd actually like to, for the startup entrepreneurs here, I'd like to have you guys actually do a thought test, and this might help you determine, whether you should bring in co-founders, and also about whether you yourself should call yourself a co-founder. And that test is this. Imagine yourself doing the company you're doing right now, but 1 or more of the co-founders were to leave the company. Would you still want to continue doing the exact same company, right? That's actually more likely to happen than not. Most companies will lose 1 or more of their co-founders over the term of their existence. For a lot of you, actually, you started the company partially because these are the people that you wanted to work with. You want to specifically work with this friend from college or this really talented coworker that you had at a different company. But they're not always going to be there. And sometimes it's not even a matter of whether you get along with that person or how the company is doing. Sometimes there's unexpected events like my partner Patrick contracting an illness. And you have to make a decision for yourself about whether the company should continue. So if you're not ready mentally to do the company by yourself without your co-founders, maybe you should take a step back before starting the company and not take on a co-founder title. It's a really tough choice to make, but part of doing the company, a lot of it is the people that you choose to do, but part of the choice is also, are you really excited about the idea? So much so that you would be willing to do it even if your founding partners were not there with you. So I didn't learn this lesson until my previous company and I lost a co-founder, but it's a good exercise for startup entrepreneurs to make, because maybe if you're not willing to make that choice of continuing the company if your co-founding partners are not there, then you should not take on a co-founder title. Another thing I'd like to talk about for co-founders is just that. It's co-founders. Traditionally, there's been a split in co-founder roles. Usually it's been, especially in the tech industry, we have the hustler and we have the hacker, right? The hustler's out there, he's landing investments, he's landing customers, right? The hacker is building product, he's managing operations. I've always been on the hacker side. Patrick has always been on the hustler side. There has to be a certain measure of respect. Usually these 2 divides actually tend to be very competitive with one another. But in actuality, when we're talking about co-founders, there's only 2 roles, right? 2 important roles. Somebody's building product and somebody's selling product. And those are the 2 roles. And on those 2 roles, one can't do without the other. As a consequence, engineers tend to think everything's about product, and salespeople tend to think like the company survives off of their revenue or off of their customers. But you have to have an essential respect between those 2 roles. There's one role I'd actually like to mention about that, which is investors are not important necessarily. Investors are important for certain stages of the company, but frequently you actually will encounter potential co-founders who are actually maybe angel investors. I'm certain some of you guys are probably, as you're raising money, you've encountered angel investors he said, hey, I have my own ideas, I want to give you money, but I want a co-founder title. That does not actually fall on the scale of the hustler or hacker, okay? You have somebody who builds product and somebody who finds customers. Customers can also be users. Somebody who's giving you money, money is great, and money is important for the short-term survivability of the operation, but an investor is not one of the co-founders. An investor somebody who gives you money is not helping you, A, find users, B, find customers, or C, building product. So unless they can do one of those three things, rightfully should not be taking a co-founder title. Okay. Unseen forces. So some of the other things I've learned is that you cannot expect some of the things which have the greatest effect over your operations. And some of my greatest mistakes have been basically not preparing for these black swan events. So for instance, for Rotten Tomatoes, we raised money in April 2000. The dot-com crash happened April 13th, 2000. And as a consequence, 95% of our revenue in our original business plan basically went out the window on 2000. 1 year later with 9/11, the last remaining 5% went out the window because when 9/11 happened, essentially the entire advertising industry just basically stopped. Our primary source of revenue essentially just stopped existing for a good 3 or 4 years when that happened. Similarly, for Alive Not Dead, we were Alive Not Dead. We launched in April 2007. It's a online social network of artists, filmmakers, musicians, and other in the arts space. And we were steadily growing. And then in 2008, we hit a big growth jump where we're essentially signing on about 3,000 users per day, which was a pretty big jump from our 2007 figures. When all of a sudden, October 2008, because of the Jasmine Revolution, a lot of protests in Egypt and elsewhere, China basically blocked all of the social media sites for an indeterminate amount of time, including Alive Not Dead. Now, at the time, actually, China was the single area with the largest amount of growth for new users for us. So we basically got the largest channel of growth cut off from under us. So I can tell you, for the two companies, like the companies I've been with longest, Rotten Tomatoes and Alive Not Dead, for both of these companies, essentially, very quickly within our early start, our business plans essentially got thrown out the window. Our number one channel of either revenue or growth were essentially eliminated within the first 2 years of operation. So I think I want to give you guys a test for resilience because we passed the test, I think, for Rotten Tomatoes, but we did not pass the test for Alive Not Dead. That was our biggest mistake. For Alive Not Dead is when essentially mainland China was blocked as a source of growth for us, we kind of went on tilt. Like our operations essentially, we got so caught down on trying to recover that traffic in mainland China that it really essentially just froze the way we were developing any new features or developing the product otherwise. So the test for resilience is essentially that you can almost bet for most companies, as the further you go down the road, that you're going to hit a black swan event like that, where you're going to lose your biggest customer, you're going to lose your biggest channel of growth or your biggest channel for revenue. And you have to imagine for yourself as a co-founder, what would you do as a company, right? If your business plan had to be thrown out the window and the way you're making money or the way you're finding customers essentially ceases to exist, how would you operate? Try to actually plan for that in advance because planning for that after it happens essentially is how companies end, okay? I actually wish for the Rotten Tomatoes case, what we were able to do, but it took us way too long, was to transition, at least temporarily, from an ad-driven startup of making money to where we are making a majority of our money from affiliate, so selling movie merchandise and memorabilia, and also data licensing, where Rotten Tomatoes began licensing movie data to Google and to Microsoft and to Netflix. And that actually allowed us to survive over the next 3 years as the dot-com bubble slowly recovered. For Alive Not Dead, unfortunately, I don't think we were able to leap that chasm, where we became so obsessed about recovering our mainland China traffic that it was at the expense of actually continuing to build a product that could continue to grow. And as a consequence, we missed the opportunity for some of the great growth areas like transitioning the site over to a better mobile platform, or to transition from long-form social media content over to short-form tweets or even Instagram photos. If you are able to get through the co-founder issues, and if you're able to go through a black swan event, which is almost certain going to happen the longer your operations go on, then you come to the last point, which is timing. Maybe some companies are able to go IPO, but the overwhelming number of companies, as the longer they go on, are going to be acquired. So the question then comes down to, when is the right time to sell your company? And I've been thinking about this. In fact, I wrote this slide on Friday, but I still had no idea about how to answer that last question. I've been thinking about it all weekend, and I've been talking to some of the other speakers who were here yesterday and today, and to some other co-founders about the answer to this question. I've realized actually there is no right answer to this question, but I will try to give my own background. So for Rotten Tomatoes, we sold Rotten Tomatoes in 2004. At the time, Google had not gone public yet. We sold Rotten Tomatoes for $10 million US. We were actually at the time, one of the only companies in our space that survived the dot-com crash and managed to make it out through the other end. We did a list when we did our business plan of 100 potential competitors, and we looked back at that list when we sold. There were only actually maybe 5 companies left, of which 3 of those companies were actually acquired before by large media companies. So like Amazon had acquired IMDb. IMDb still existed. Yahoo Movies obviously was owned by Yahoo. 95 of those companies were out of business. One of them was Rotten Tomatoes, that managed to be in the last 5. So after the dot-com crash and coming out the other side, it was like coming out of war, essentially. We were pretty traumatized. And we really weren't certain whether there was going to be another black swan event. So we weren't sure if the Google IPO was going to be successful. As funny as that sounds saying now, we were afraid that if something were to go wrong with the Google IPO, it could essentially have the same effect as another dot-com crash. Looking in hindsight, obviously we made the wrong choice. If we had continued working on Rotten Tomatoes, and we actually honestly enjoyed working on Rotten Tomatoes, maybe we could have had a multiples more exit. Probably we could have. There's always a limit to the amount of risk you're willing to take. For Alive Not Dead, it might have been too late. We did hit exponential traffic in 2008. What would have happened rather than trying to, hustle it out for 3 years and recover our mainland traffic if we had just concentrated on our Southeast Asia traffic, which was also very good? Maybe things would have actually turned out better. So the right answer, I think, for that last portion, which is we would not have been able to sell the companies in the first place unless we did the proper prep work. Okay, so there's a certain amount of prep work they have to do before you sell a company, and it takes a long time. Part of that is you have to be out there, right? Somebody in the company has to be representing the company to potential acquirers. Somebody in the company has to constantly be informing the press about, new developments in the company. Somebody has to be out there meeting with potential future investors or potential future acquirers. You actually have to be building on a constant rate within the company, new features, new audience, etc. That's just the prep work, okay? But the real decision, obviously, then comes internally. For Rotten Tomatoes, at the middle of 2004, was the right time for us, just lifestyle-wise. Both my partner and I felt like we wanted to chase opportunities overseas in Asia. We felt like that was something that was personally interesting for us. For Alive Not Dead, both my partner and I, we had essentially met with potential acquirers previously, but For my other partner, he had health issues, and for me, you know, I'd just recently gotten married. So actually, that decision to get acquired actually is not so much. I bet if you talk to most co-founders who got acquired, the deciding factor is not just about the money. It's always something else. It's always something internal, right? The question then comes at that point of when you actually pull the trigger to get acquired, because in order to make that decision, you have to do the prep work in advance. You have to constantly meet with potential competition who also your potential acquirers. You have to really build the company in the right way. And then when you actually do get to the point where you internally want to make that lifestyle choice to move on or to work under a bigger company, only then can you actually take advantage of all those prior years of prep work and actually then be acquired. So, for instance, for Rotten Tomatoes, prior to our final acquisition in 2004, we had received maybe acquisition offers from at least 6 or 7 different companies in the prior 3 years. For Alive Not Dead, it was similar for the prior maybe 1 or 2 years. So it was only at the end when internally we made the decision based off of lifestyle choices that we were able to take advantage of that prior prep work. So that's pretty much it. Those 3 items, I would say the kernel of this is that for startup founders, it's a cliche, but it is a roller coaster, right? There's going to be, like I said before, unforeseen events when you're a co-founder. That is the key difference between being a startup founder and working in a big company, is the amount of turbulence that you're going to experience. There are going to be ups and there are going to be downs. But in summary, just to give you guys a little bit of hope after all of this bleak talk that I just gave you, previously, you know, when we were doing Rotten Tomatoes, actually, one of our advisors was actually the actor Jet Li. We had been doing his official website, kind of as nerdy super fans of his for a couple of years, and as a consequence, he had always been a friend to the company. And he, at the very, very bottom of the .com bust, things were going really bad. Like I'd mentioned before, we had actually, during that time, we basically lost all of our revenue in a period of 2 years. And we had to contract the company from about 30 employees down to just 7 employees. And Jet actually came to the U.S. to film his first major U.S. movie and invited us to visit him on the set. And he saw us on the film set, and we went over to talk to him. He said, "How are things going with Rotten Tomatoes?" And we were pretty bleak about it. I was like, you know, actually things are pretty bad in the whole online space. We told him about our issues, about having to let go of employees. And some of you guys might not know, but actually Jet is very religious. He's very Buddhist, and he really believes in this cycle of life and the cycle of ups and downs. And he said, you know, you need to think of this, which is right now you guys are at the very, very bottom of this cycle. But life is just a circle, right? And right now you're at the very bottom. You just wait long enough, that circle is going to flip and you'll be on top again. And I actually carry that with me very strongly at heart as a startup founder. Maybe some of you guys are going through extreme pressures right now, right? It's not easy to be a startup founder. There's tremendous competition right now. But just know as a startup founder that you are going to experience turbulence. And if this is possibly your very worst time right now, that just wait long enough, be consistent with your work, like Ray said, and eventually you'll be on top of the cycle again, and things will be better than you were before. So good luck to all the startup founders here. I hope that your entrepreneur journey is as fruitful and as memorable as mine is. Thank you.